The most shocking moment came when Sarah stood alone under the great wedding arch, surrounded by towering white roses and sparkling crystal decorations. She was wearing the gown she had chosen 5 months ago, a gown that made her feel like a princess whenever she tried it on. Her heart pounded so loudly that she thought everyone in the crowd could hear it. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but a chill had taken over. Everything was in place for a grand celebration: delicate white chairs lined with velvet ribbons, a dozen violins waiting to play, and family members dressed in formal clothes, nervously peeking around. Yet there was no groom. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. She noticed that some of her guests were whispering among themselves, sending her sympathetic looks that felt like daggers to her pride. A few minutes earlier, her fiancé's cousin had approached her with an envelope in his trembling hand. She remembered the feeling of dread washing over her when he said, "He's not coming." The note inside the envelope confirmed that Sarah's millionaire fiancé, Gabriel McAllister, had chosen to run off with his white mistress. He had left her behind, left her standing alone at the altar, left her to face hundreds of shocked faces who had gathered to witness a union that would never be. Those words on the paper made her stomach churn. Sarah felt numb, as if her entire body had turned to stone. She couldn't think straight. She glanced at the decorations Gabriel had insisted on, the white lilies he said would match her dress, and the light pink ribbons that would contrast with her dark complexion in a beautiful way. Now, none of that mattered. The day everyone had anticipated, the day she thought would change her life for the better, had become a scene of heartbreak and disbelief. The bride had been left behind for someone else, someone who seemed to fit what Gabriel's family really wanted. That knowledge hit Sarah like a punch to the gut, making her eyes well up with tears she tried so hard to hold back. Sarah's mind spun back to when she first met Gabriel. She had grown up in a tight-knit, middle-class family in New Jersey. Her parents worked hard to send her to a good college, and she had poured her heart and soul into her studies. She dreamed of becoming a successful woman, someone her parents could be proud of. When she moved to New York after graduation, she got a job at an advertising agency. It didn't pay the best salary, but it was a starting point. Her boss liked her creativity, and she soon felt she might build a decent life. One day, Gabriel McAllister walked into her agency. He was looking for a team to design ads for a new real estate venture he was backing. She remembered how he strolled in wearing a tailored suit and polished shoes that looked like they cost as much as her monthly rent. He had an air of confidence, a powerful aura. People rushed to accommodate him, opening doors, fetching him coffee, and offering him meeting rooms. But it was Sarah he noticed. He liked her fresh ideas, her honesty, and the slight nervousness in her voice when she spoke about the concepts. Despite his wealthy background, he seemed to appreciate the realness she brought to the table. Gabriel asked for her opinion on several design mock-ups, and he listened carefully when she spoke. After they had finished their work meeting, he stayed behind a moment longer. He asked if she would be free for dinner. Sarah had hesitated, thinking it was only business, but he had a certain charm that made her blush. She agreed, though she told him it should not be taken as anything more than a professional courtesy. He only smiled. That night, Gabriel took her to a fancy restaurant she had never even dreamed of stepping into. The hostess led them to a private booth with velvet seats. Waiters brought out exotic dishes and fine wine. Sarah felt out of place, but Gabriel made her feel important. He complimented her intelligence and said she was different from all the other people he usually met in his social circle. She found herself drawn to his gentle smile and the genuine interest he showed in her ideas for future campaigns. When he walked her home, he didn't try to force a kiss or put any pressure on her. He simply said, "I would love to see you again," and smiled that warm smile. As weeks went by, they continued meeting. Sometimes they shared ideas about Gabriel's real estate projects. Other times he asked about Sarah's family and her childhood. She told him about her mother, who was the strongest woman she knew, and her father, who had always encouraged her to be the best she could be. Gabriel would listen quietly, leaning forward with an expression of pure fascination, as if every word she said was a window into a world he never knew existed. Slowly, their relationship grew. They went on dates in all sorts of places. Some were simple, like a small cafe where Sarah introduced him to her favorite sweet pastries. Others were more lavish. Gabriel enjoyed taking her to events in the city, from art exhibitions to charity balls. He liked to show her off. Sometimes Sarah felt awkward because she was one of the few black women in these circles, but Gabriel would hold her hand and reassure her that he was proud of her. He told her that she deserved to be there just as much as anyone else. During those events, Sarah met many influential people. Some of them were polite and welcoming, but there were also those who shot her curious or condescending looks. She could almost hear them wondering why this wealthy man was with her, a girl from a modest background. Still, Gabriel would gently guide her through the crowd, never leaving her side. It made her feel safe, like she belonged with him. In time, love blossomed between them. Gabriel told her he had never felt such a strong connection with anyone. He loved her sincerity, her wit, and her strength. She found him caring, intelligent, and charming in ways that melted her heart. He wasn't just a man of money, he was sensitive to her feelings. He would surprise her with small gifts, like a handmade bracelet from a local artisan or a book of poetry, because he remembered she once mentioned her love for poems. By the time he asked her to be his girlfriend, Sarah felt like she was on cloud nine. Despite the joy they shared, a shadow hovered over their relationship. Sarah could sense it whenever Gabriel's family was mentioned. Early on, Gabriel had said that his parents traveled a lot and that he had few close relatives left in the city. He sometimes mentioned his cousin Derek, who was busy handling part of the family business. Sarah asked if his parents knew about her. Gabriel would hesitate, his gaze dropping to the floor. He would say something like, "They're not around much, but I'll tell them in my own time." It was an odd response, but Sarah assumed that maybe he wanted to be sure about their relationship before introducing her to such an influential family. She told herself it made sense. She tried not to push the topic. However, as the months passed and their love grew stronger, Gabriel still seemed reluctant to have her meet his parents or even other relatives. Whenever Sarah brought it up, he would gently change the subject or assure her that he would introduce her to them soon. Sarah had no idea about the deep prejudice that was hidden beneath the polished exterior of the McAllister clan. She learned small hints only through comments from others in Gabriel's circle. For instance, an acquaintance at one of Gabriel's business events once whispered to her in a condescending tone, "I find it so refreshing that Gabriel is dating someone so different." It shows he's open-minded, doesn't it? Sarah felt the sting in those words. She guessed what different really meant. She tried to laugh it off, but it stuck with her. She asked Gabriel if anyone in his family had problems with interracial relationships. He shrugged, saying, "They know better than to judge me for who I love," in a casual voice. That ended the conversation for a while, but the uneasy feeling returned whenever such comments popped up. Months turned into a year, and Sarah and Gabriel felt more united than ever. He told her he wanted to settle down and have a life with her, away from the constant noise of the city. He hinted at a future marriage. For Sarah, the thought of being his wife was thrilling, but also made her anxious. She wondered what his parents would think of her. More importantly, she worried about whether Gabriel would truly stand by her side if they disapproved. Then, one crisp morning, Gabriel arranged a beautiful surprise. He took Sarah out to the countryside, to a lovely estate he said was a family property but rarely used. They walked among blossoming flowers and old oak trees. In the cool shade of a gazebo, Gabriel got down on one knee. He held out a ring that sparkled in the sunlight. Sarah's eyes widened. She felt tears building up as he said, "Sarah, you make me a better man. Will you marry me?" For a moment, she forgot all about her concerns, all about the potential disapproval from his side of the family. She saw only the man she loved offering her a new future. She said yes with all her heart. News of their engagement spread quickly among Gabriel's close friends. People congratulated them. Sarah was both excited and nervous to meet his parents now that it was official. But Gabriel told her that his parents were out of the country handling some business deals, so they would meet her as soon as they got back. Meanwhile, plans for the wedding started moving fast. Gabriel wanted it to be perfect. He hired the best wedding planner in the city. Together, they chose an elegant theme white and pink, with plenty of flowers and classical music. Sarah found it a bit overwhelming. She had dreamed of a simpler ceremony, maybe in her parents' backyard with close family and friends. But Gabriel seemed eager to show the world how much he loved her. He insisted that she deserved the best of everything. As the months went by, Sarah tried to reach out to her own family to include them in the process. Her mother was overjoyed, and her father was proud, though a bit wary. He worried about how Gabriel's family would treat her. Still, he wanted to trust that Gabriel loved her enough to protect her. Sarah's friends were thrilled as well, though some expressed concern that Gabriel was moving too fast with the expensive wedding. Sarah took it as a sign of his devotion. She tried to dismiss any fears, telling herself that she needed to trust her soon-to-be husband. 2 weeks before the wedding, Gabriel's parents finally returned from their overseas travels. Sarah's heart raced at the idea of finally meeting them. Gabriel arranged a dinner at a luxury hotel's private suite, complete with a personal chef and live string music. Sarah wore a classy but simple black dress, carefully chosen to avoid looking too flashy. She felt a flutter in her stomach. This was a chance to show them that she truly cared for their son and wanted to be accepted into their family. When Gabriel's parents arrived, they looked polished. His father, Alan McAllister, was tall, with silver hair that was styled perfectly. His mother, Judith McAllister, was elegant, wearing expensive jewelry and a formal evening gown. At first, they were polite, greeting Sarah with forced smiles. But Sarah could sense tension in the air. Alan's handshake was firm but quick, and Judith only offered a cold nod. They asked general questions about Sarah's job and how she grew up. She tried to give honest answers, but she could feel judgment behind their eyes. They kept glancing at her in a way that made her skin tingle with unease. During dinner, Gabriel tried to ease the conversation. He proudly talked about Sarah's achievements at her advertising firm, highlighting her talent and creativity. His parents listened, but their responses were curt. At one point, Judith asked Sarah about her family's background, pressing for details about her father's job and whether Sarah's mother came from a long line of professionals. The question felt invasive. Sarah politely answered that her parents were hardworking people who valued education, though they did not have big careers or wealth. Judith gave a thin smile. "Well," she said, "it's good you appreciate the better things now that you're with Gabriel. We wouldn't want you feeling out of place in our world, would we?" The words stung. Sarah forced a polite smile and said nothing. Gabriel squeezed her hand under the table, trying to reassure her. He later insisted his mother had a difficult personality but that she would come around. Yet the pit in Sarah's stomach did not go away. Another uneasy moment followed when Sarah excused herself to use the restroom. On her way back, she overheard voices near the suite's entrance. It was Gabriel's parents talking in hushed but urgent tones. She paused because something about their tone alarmed her. "I can't believe he's serious about marrying her," Judith whispered harshly. "This will bring nothing but trouble. You know how it will look." Alan sighed. "We've discussed this. Gabriel is stubborn. He insists she's the love of his life. We should find a way to discourage him without causing a scene." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. She was hurt, but she swallowed her pain and moved away before they noticed her. Her heart pounded as she returned to the table. She tried to maintain her composure, but tears threatened to fill her eyes. That night, after Gabriel dropped her off at her apartment, she wanted to tell him what she had heard. But the words wouldn't come out. She didn't know how to confront him about his parents' clear disapproval. She worried that it might make things worse. Instead, she kept quiet and hoped that love would prevail in the end. A few days later, Sarah was fitted for her wedding gown. It was a custom design with intricate lace and a train that flowed behind her like a river of white. Standing in front of the mirror, she felt beautiful and proud. She thought about the day she would walk down the aisle to stand beside Gabriel, the man who had changed her life. She tried to push aside the worries about his family. After all, Gabriel had told her many times that nothing would come between them. Meanwhile, Sarah noticed that Gabriel was receiving more phone calls and stepping out to answer them. He seemed stressed, and whenever Sarah asked what was wrong, he would dismiss it by saying it was just more business issues. Sarah wanted to believe him, but she sensed something else. Sometimes when he returned from those calls, he would be quieter than usual. He would stare at Sarah in a way that hinted at worry or guilt. She tried to bring it up, but he would kiss her forehead and say, "I'm just tired." She let it be, telling herself he was under pressure from the wedding plans. But in the days leading up to the ceremony, Sarah started receiving strange messages on social media. Anonymous accounts wrote hurtful comments about how she didn't belong in that world, and how Gabriel would find someone better suited for him. At first, Sarah ignored them, believing they were just internet trolls. But the messages kept coming, some even using slurs about her race. She felt unsettled, but she tried to keep it hidden from Gabriel. She didn't want to add more stress. One evening, Gabriel found her crying in front of her laptop. She showed him the messages. He was furious, vowing to find out who was behind them. He wrapped his arms around her and assured her that no one could change how he felt. For a moment, Sarah felt safe, as if her own knight was protecting her. But deep down, she wondered how strong Gabriel's shield really was, especially if his own parents shared similar views, or if others in his social circle felt the same way. On the wedding day, Sarah woke up with a strange mix of excitement and dread. She got ready in a luxurious suite at the venue, helped by her mother and bridesmaids. Everyone told her she looked stunning. Her mother whispered, "You deserve happiness, my baby girl," while placing a small family heirloom in her hair for good luck. Sarah felt tears gather in her eyes, but she kept a brave face, reminding herself that this was supposed to be a joyous day. When she arrived at the decorated garden, her heart fluttered. She saw rows of white chairs, pink ribbons, and the grand arch filled with roses. An orchestra waited off to the side, preparing to play the wedding march. Guests milled around, chatting excitedly. Sarah's side of the family was smaller, simpler, but they looked proud and supportive. Gabriel's side was larger, filled with wealthy individuals wearing glamorous outfits. She saw Gabriel's parents seated in the front row, looking composed. As Sarah made her way closer to the altar, she realized Gabriel was nowhere in sight. She thought he might be waiting out of view. The minutes ticked by. Guests exchanged puzzled looks. The wedding planner looked nervous, fiddling with her clipboard. Sarah's father approached her and whispered that Gabriel might be running late or stuck in traffic. But Sarah knew Gabriel. He was never late. He was always punctual, especially for something this important. Anxiety gnawed at her. She felt sweat bead on her forehead, and her hands grew clammy. Finally, Gabriel's cousin Derek walked up to her, holding a plain envelope. His face was pale, and he seemed unable to meet her eyes. He pressed the envelope into her hand and said in a shaky voice, "I'm sorry, Sarah." The words made her chest tighten. She tore open the envelope, only to find a brief letter with Gabriel's hurried handwriting. "I can't go through with this. I'm sorry, but I'm leaving with Clarissa. I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me." Sarah's world seemed to stop. Her breathing became shallow, her heart pounded, and she heard the muffled voices of people around her, asking what was going on. She looked at Derek, but he only lowered his eyes. Before she could say anything, several gasps broke out among the guests. Someone murmured that Gabriel had run off with his white mistress. The words burned into Sarah's mind, echoing over and over. She felt as if she had been hit by a truck. She was frozen in place, tears streaming down her face. Her mother grabbed her hand, but Sarah barely registered it. This was how she found out. This was how her dream ended in humiliation and heartbreak, under the eyes of everyone she loved and many people who likely never wanted her in the family at all. In the chaos that followed, Sarah's relatives tried to shield her from the prying eyes of the guests. Cameras were still flashing, as some unscrupulous people in the crowd snapped pictures. The wedding planner tried to control the situation, telling the orchestra to stop playing and the caterers to hold off. But nothing could calm the storm that raged in Sarah's heart. She felt betrayed and ashamed. The man she loved had abandoned her, choosing a Mistress woman named Clarissa, who was rumored to have been around Gabriel's circle for months. The humiliation was overwhelming. Sarah could hardly walk as her father guided her away from the crowd. She looked back once and saw Judith McAllister. The woman's face was unreadable, but Sarah thought she detected a faint look of relief. That alone shattered what little composure Sarah had left. She let out a cry and buried her face in her hands. Family members ushered her into a private room, away from the confused chatter of the guests. She collapsed onto a couch, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her white dress was now a reminder of her shattered dreams. For hours, Sarah remained in that room. Friends came and tried to comfort her, but she could barely speak. All she could do was replay Gabriel's words in her mind. "I can't go through with this. I'm leaving with Clarissa." Part of her wanted to hate him, but another part wanted to know why he had done this. Was it his parents' influence? Did Clarissa manipulate him? Or had he never really loved Sarah in the first place? The questions tangled in her mind like a ball of thorns, each prick drawing more pain. When night fell, Sarah's mother took her home. Gabriel never called or texted. Sarah felt completely lost. A week after what was supposed to be her wedding day, she still hadn't heard from him. The press got wind of the scandal, and some tabloids printed nasty stories, painting Sarah as the jilted fiancé who had been left for a more acceptable match. Racist remarks found their way into online discussions. Sarah tried not to read them, but it was like being caught in a storm she couldn't escape. In the quiet aftermath of the fiasco, Sarah sank into a deep depression. She stopped going to work. She barely ate, barely slept. Her mother and father did their best to be there for her, but they couldn't fully understand the betrayal she felt. She had loved Gabriel wholeheartedly and believed he loved her too. Worse, she felt humiliated in front of her own community. The story became a topic of gossip among neighbors and coworkers. People whispered about how Sarah had been left for a white woman, fueling discussions about class, race, and betrayal. Sarah distanced herself from everyone except her parents. She turned off her phone and rarely checked her email. Even letters from concerned friends went unread. It was too painful to face the world, which seemed to delight in her misery. The only thing that brought her slight relief was writing in a journal where she poured out her anger, sorrow, and confusion. She wrote about her childhood dreams of a happy marriage, her excitement when Gabriel proposed, and the devastating moment she read his note. Sometimes she tore the pages out and threw them away, as if trying to discard the memories along with the paper. A month passed. Sarah's boss sent flowers, urging her to come back to work when she felt ready. Though she was grateful for the gesture, she didn't feel ready to re-enter the corporate world. She had lost faith in her judgment and in the goodness of people. Everything she had believed in seemed like a lie. But her father spoke to her one evening, asking her to consider going back. He told her, "Don't let this man steal your future. You're bigger than this pain." His words resonated with her. She decided to slowly pick up the pieces of her life. Returning to work was tough, but Sarah had spent enough time in hiding. When she walked into the office, some coworkers looked at her with pity. Others tried to act normal, but she could sense they were tiptoeing around her. She decided to keep her head high and focus on her tasks. Oddly, work became a distraction from her heartbreak. She poured her energy into new advertising campaigns, staying late and brainstorming fresh ideas. In moments of quiet, she still felt the sting of what Gabriel had done, but she tried to lock those thoughts away. 2 months later, something unexpected happened. A new client came to the agency, Drake Holdings, an international conglomerate involved in tech, energy, and retail. They were massive, even bigger than the usual corporations her agency pitched to. Word around the office was that the head of Drake Holdings himself wanted to be involved in the project. People were buzzing with excitement because the head of Drake Holdings was none other than Lionel Drake, a mysterious billionaire rumored to own private islands and a network of philanthropic causes around the globe. He rarely handled advertising deals in person, but apparently he wanted a hands-on approach this time. The agency called a meeting with all key creatives, including Sarah. She wasn't sure she felt ready to meet another ultra-rich client, given her history with Gabriel. But she joined the conference room with the rest of the team. When Lionel Drake walked in, Sarah was immediately struck by his presence. He was tall, with a neat beard and a quiet, confident air. Unlike Gabriel's flashy style, Lionel dressed simply, in a dark suit with no tie, and wore an expression that was calm but intense. He listened quietly as the agency's director introduced different members of the team. When they came to Sarah, he nodded in acknowledgement, but she noticed a flicker of interest in his eyes. They discussed the upcoming campaign for Drake Holdings, focusing on sustainable energy solutions. Sarah presented a few sketches she had prepared the night before. Lionel paid close attention, asking pointed questions about her design choices and marketing strategies. After the meeting, he asked if he could speak to Sarah privately. She followed him to a smaller office, where he quietly closed the door. She felt a bit nervous, unsure of what he wanted. But his first words were kind, praising her creativity and the depth of her ideas. He asked where she had learned her craft and how she developed her concepts. Sarah was taken aback by his genuine interest. Most high-level clients barely had time for such details. Something about Lionel's calm, thoughtful demeanor put her at ease. They talked for nearly half an hour. Sarah felt a spark of inspiration as she shared her thoughts on branding, visual elements, and audience engagement. Lionel listened carefully, occasionally smiling or nodding. By the time they finished, Sarah felt like she had found someone who truly appreciated her work. Lionel thanked her and said he looked forward to more discussions. She smiled, feeling a hint of excitement she hadn't felt in a long time. Over the next few weeks, Sarah worked closely with Lionel's team to shape the campaign. They had regular meetings, and Lionel often attended them personally. He always made sure to hear Sarah's input. Whenever she spoke, he seemed to focus entirely on her words, which made her feel valued. Little by little, they started exchanging friendly banter after the meetings. Lionel would ask about her day, and she would ask about his philanthropic projects. One evening, Lionel requested an extended discussion after everyone else had left. Sarah stayed behind, and they went through the latest ad designs in a quiet boardroom. When they finished, Lionel asked if she wanted to grab dinner and continue brainstorming. Sarah hesitated, recalling how her last involvement with a wealthy man had ended. But something in Lionel's sincere gaze made her say yes. They dined at a small restaurant a few blocks from the office. It wasn't fancy, just a cozy place with wooden tables and dim lights. As they ate, Lionel surprised Sarah by asking how she was doing on a personal level. He gently mentioned that he had heard rumors in the industry about her canceled wedding with Gabriel McAllister. Sarah stiffened, but Lionel's tone was empathetic. not nosy. She felt her guard weaken. She told him it had been the worst time of her life and that she was still healing. He listened quietly, not pushing for details. When she finished talking, he placed his hand over hers for a brief moment and simply said, "You deserve better." Those 3 words struck Sarah. She didn't know how to respond. A swirl of emotions moved through her: fear of being hurt again, but also gratitude for his kindness. They moved on to lighter topics, discussing films they liked and places they wanted to visit someday. By the end of the meal, Sarah felt a sense of calm she hadn't experienced in a long time. As more weeks turned into months, Sarah found herself becoming close friends with Lionel. Their work collaboration was a success. The advertising campaign for Drake Holdings was receiving positive feedback, and the company was happy with her creativity. Lionel, meanwhile, made it a point to invite Sarah to various conferences, charity events, and even some private gatherings with other philanthropists. She hesitated at first, haunted by memories of Gabriel's upper-class world. But Lionel was different. He didn't flaunt his wealth, and he treated everyone around him with respect. Their friendship deepened. After each professional event, they would find time to grab coffee or dinner. Sometimes they would talk about business, other times about life. Lionel told Sarah about his late parents and how he had taken over Drake Holdings at a young age, determined to use the power he had for good. He spoke of new ventures in clean energy, of building community centers in disadvantaged neighborhoods. Sarah shared her own passion for advocating diversity in advertising, explaining how she wanted to use her skills to change how people of color were portrayed in media. They found common ground in their desire to improve the world around them. At times, Sarah felt the stir of new feelings. She tried to deny it to herself. After all, Lionel was a super billionaire, with more influence and power than Gabriel ever had. She feared that she would just be hurt all over again if she let herself fall for someone in a similar social bracket. But Lionel never pressured her. He was patient, always respectful, and he never crossed a line without her consent. Then, one night, after a successful presentation at a high-profile convention, Lionel walked Sarah to her car. A soft drizzle started, and Sarah searched in her bag for an umbrella. Lionel stood there, raindrops catching in his hair, gazing at her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. He moved closer, lifting the collar of his jacket to shield her from the rain. Slowly, he leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss on her forehead. It was a tender, innocent gesture, yet it left Sarah trembling. The golden light reflected on the water, and a gentle breeze stirred the trees. Sarah felt a deep gratitude for the second chance she had been given. She thought back to that day when she was left standing at the altar in humiliation, tears streaming down her face. Now she stood tall, a married woman who had found real love. Lionel's fingers interlaced with hers, and she knew they would face life's challenges together. In the following weeks, they settled into married life. They split their time between Lionel's city penthouse and the estate. Sarah continued her career at the advertising agency, though she also took on more philanthropic work. Lionel introduced her to his network of nonprofit organizations, and she soon found herself leading a creative initiative to empower young artists from underrepresented communities. They used Drake Holdings' influence to secure funding, and Sarah organized workshops and mentorship programs. The work gave her a sense of purpose that aligned with her own vision of social progress. Meanwhile, the story of Sarah's marriage to Lionel circulated in society gossip. The narrative had shifted from heartbreak to triumph. Many people saw it as a story of resilience, an example of how someone could overcome betrayal and find real happiness. Even those who had once judged her seemed to admire her strength. Sarah didn't let the attention go to her head. She remained focused on the work she did and the home she and Lionel were building together. Every so often, though, Sarah couldn't help but remember Gabriel. She wondered how he was doing, whether he regretted his choice. She tried not to dwell on it, but she still felt a pang of hurt when thinking about how cruelly he had ended things. However, she refused to let that memory taint her new life. She had something real now, a marriage based on mutual respect rather than appearances. She told herself she had already won the greatest victory by surviving and finding genuine love. But life has a way of bringing back old faces at the most unexpected times. One crisp fall evening, nearly a year after her wedding to Lionel, Sarah attended a charity gala in the city. She was there to give a short speech about her mentorship program and to thank donors for their support. Lionel was scheduled to arrive later, as he had a prior meeting. Sarah felt confident as she moved through the crowd, greeting acquaintances and well-wishers. Suddenly, she spotted someone who made her blood run cold: Gabriel McAllister. standing across the room with a drink in his hand. He looked different, thinner and more strained, as if life had not been kind to him. Sarah's heart pounded. She considered walking away, but Gabriel noticed her and approached. The conversation that followed was brief, but loaded with emotion. "Sarah," he said, barely meeting her eyes, "you look wonderful. I heard about your wedding. Congratulations." His voice trembled, and he sounded nothing like the confident man she once knew. Sarah forced a polite smile. "Thank you. I'm doing well." He nodded and paused as if searching for words. "Clarissa and things didn't work out. She left when times got tough. I lost a lot of money in a failed deal. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I was a coward. I let my family's expectations and my own fears decide for me." Sarah's chest felt tight. She looked at him, remembering the note he left on her wedding day. The betrayal and humiliation surged back, but she also felt a strange pity for him. "I've moved on, Gabriel, and I'm happy," she said, her voice steady. He winced, looking at the diamond ring on her hand, noticing it was a different ring. "I know. I wanted you to know that I regret everything. I'm sorry." He let out a shaky breath. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I was a fool." Sarah could see genuine remorse in his eyes. It stirred conflicting emotions in her. Part of her wanted to scream at him, to ask why he chose his white mistress over her, to demand he explain why he caved to racist pressures. But another part just felt tired of the past. She realized she had no desire to go back to that pain. She had already built something stronger. Before she could respond, Lionel arrived and walked up beside her. "Is everything all right?" he asked, putting a protective arm around Sarah's waist. Gabriel cast his eyes downward, recognizing the powerful billionaire at Sarah's side. He took a step back. "It's fine," Sarah said, leaning against Lionel's comforting presence. She glanced at Gabriel one last time. "Goodbye, Gabriel. I wish you peace." Then she turned away, walking off with her husband, leaving Gabriel behind, holding his empty glass and the weight of his regrets. As they walked away, Sarah felt her heart rate slow down. Her past had appeared before her eyes, looking broken and remorseful. She clutched Lionel's hand, grateful that she had found a new life, one free from the chains of doubt and disguised prejudice. The suspense that had haunted her for so long had finally come to an end. She realized that some endings are necessary for better beginnings, and in that moment she felt a sense of peace and closure that she had once thought she would never experience. Hey everyone! I just wanted to take a moment to say a huge thank you for helping us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support means the world to me, and I'm incredibly grateful for every like, comment, and share. This is only the beginning. Let's keep growing this amazing community together, so if you haven't already, please subscribe, drop a like, and leave a comment. Thank you once again for all the love and support. More great content is on the way,